All right, church, we are back for another installment of our midweek encouragement video, and I have with me today, we're not Zooming, but we're actually in person, 6 feet apart, I guess, I'm hoping. I have one of our shepherds, Curt Williams, with us. So Curt, say hi to the camera.
Hello.
We're going to spend a little time talking about something that we think is really important and something that I know is really on a lot of your minds. And that is church, and what does church look like whenever we're able to get back together, and when will we be able to get back together, and all that stuff that goes into it. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're not going to answer all the questions because we don't have all the answers, but we do want to share some things that we think are important to us. So first, I think it's important, maybe before we even get to the church part, is to ask, what does shepherding look like right now? Because it's different. We're not together. You're not seeing people in the hallways on Sundays. We're not in classrooms. But shepherding is still happening. So what does that look like?
Yeah, most of you remember back, all this stuff started happening so fast. And every day it seemed like the scenario was changing. And so early on, we were trying to figure out, what does this look like? And so very early on, what we kind of set the goal is to use this uncertainty to create opportunity, or how do we help our people thrive during this? So one of the first things that we did is we just decided we need to commit ourselves to prayer. And so we started meeting more regularly to pray, and that became a large portion of the times that we got together. And so we believe that should be the first step anyway, but we really knew that there were people out there being impacted. We all were, but we knew some people really were, the impact was greater on them. And so that's why we started kind of reaching out proactively as we heard things, touching people, see who needed help and all that. And that's been, I think, really valuable because we want to help those that really need it at this time. And I just think that's worked out. A couple other things that we did was we also wanted to reach out to staff. This is a change for everybody, and they were doing things differently, and we really appreciate it because they have been very creative, and they've done things that have really helped us to shepherd. And then the other thing is that we tried, with all of the things that were going on, could we participate better in them so that people would see us doing that, whether that was Zoom calls or some of the other activities. We wanted the people to see us out there. And so that's really what we've been trying to do. But me personally, I've always been a people person, and so it is kind of different not to be in person and trying to do it, but just to know we're praying for you, and if you have a need, we'd love to hear from you.
So, the debate right now in kind of the public square, politics and everywhere else is reopening our churches. When do we reopen our churches? Which I think is unfortunate language. It implies that churches have been closed, and I'm not really sure that's the right way to think about it. It's churches have not closed. Churches are still worshiping. And even our church, right? We're still trying very hard to stay on mission, joining in the work of Jesus for the good of the world, and we're trying to continue with that. We're trying to keep our online worship experiences going, and so we've never closed, and so it's kind of hard to reopen when you've never actually closed. I just think through, you mentioned a few of the Zoom rooms. There's lots of things we've been doing. The group of families that met in the hospital parking lot and prayed for all the doctors and nurses, and Taylor is here every Thursday getting freezer meals for people to pass out, and the resource drive, and just on it goes. It just looks different. It's not closed, it's just different. And so really probably the better language is not reopening, but reentering the building, reentering worship. And that is important to us. I mean, it's important to all church traditions, faith traditions. The corporate gathering of believers coming together to worship is important. And so, that's a big question. When do we do that? How do we do that? When's the best time? What's the safest way to do it? And I know that we've been talking about this We have a committee of people that have been talking about this very thing, and kind of right off the bat, we really, the elders on this committee kind of took charge in this of saying we've got certain principles or priorities that we are going to stay committed to. So why don't you, before we even get into reentry and church and all that, why don't you just share what's been those guiding principles that we said, these are the things we're going to stick to and we're not going to waver from these.
Okay. You know, I'm honored to serve with really all the people that kind of serve in a leadership position in this church, because I can remember on a Friday night us coming together, and this is when things were starting to change, and we made a decision that, hey, we weren't going to meet on Sundays, and we didn't know what that was going to be like, and we didn't know the future, what was really going to continue to happen. But here's what I can tell you. The leadership from the very beginning, it was all about acting out of love and trying to use wisdom. We didn't act out of fear. We wanted to do what was right by the church. And so right now, if you really think about it, here's what we know. Okay, the virus is still out there, and it's highly contagious, right? It has been around the world, so we know that. And it can cause illness, and serious illness, and can lead to death, especially among the vulnerable people. And I think just lately we're learning that about 35% of the people are asymptomatic. And that's the trick in this whole thing. When there's people that can be walking around that can spread it and don't even know it, it's just really hard. And so here's what we've kind of said we're fully committed to. And the leadership of the church, as we move forward, this is our number one priority. And that is really the protection of our missional partners. You know, early on there was a thing that went around that I think was love always protects. That word always has really impacted us. So we're trying to do everything we can to protect the missional partners. The other thing is that the CDC and the state and local governments have put out guidelines, and as we look at those and we consider them relevant, we want to do our part. And the other thing that comes out from God is love your neighbors. We don't want to be acting against what other people are doing, and especially with something that has the potential to take lives and that. And so when it's relevant, we're going to do what they say. And we are truly committed to making the Sunday morning worship as impactful and meaningful as we can. And finally, we want to continue in our emphasis on praying, equipping, serving, and sharing, because we believe God is still on mission. And I do want to share just a story to encourage you. Last year in Reach, and we've been doing this a couple years, but we provide what we call Missional Mills to the schools. Well, the schools are out, but guess what? The kids are still hungry. We have been able to continue that ministry, and we just learned that it's also going to continue through the summer. So all of you that have donated and helped pack, it is making an impact, I think, right when they need it the most, because things are hard for a lot of those families. And so God is still on mission.
You said something that kind of spurred a thought. You talked about not only protecting our missional partners, protecting our faith family, but thinking about what that means for our neighbors, for our community. And it made me think of, I was on a Zoom conference with Randy Harris and a number of other people, and Randy was talking, and he made a statement that really impacted me. He said, if we rush into this, if a local church rushes into this and doesn't take seriously protecting not just their people, but the community, and because we rush into it, a number of people get COVID and get seriously ill, maybe some die, he says that will kill the witness of your church for the next 20 to 30 years. And that's the weight that we carry when we think about these things. So I want us to think about, because we've had these discussions in our committee meetings, going back to the language of reentering as opposed to reopening. Reentering the corporate worship, the public gathering of the church. I think there's a lot more that goes into that than people really think about, even on a normal Sunday. But then you add all the safety precautions and things that we would have to do to stay with the guidelines that are put out by the state and the CDC and stuff. So it almost makes it it's just not feasible, right? To do all that and to make it a meaningful experience. Can you maybe share with the church some of the things that we've talked about, that we've thought through in terms of what would be some of the obstacles or the logistical nightmares that we would have to work through in order to actually make it happen for us to get together and worship?
Yeah. I think if we really sit back and think about in-person worship, I'm going to call it, because I think that's another term that people use. It's meant to be close and praising, and you want to be there for people. You want to pray with them. You want to hug people and all that. And so when you start talking about that, that kind of goes against some of the guidelines or relevant things that are out there. And so it does make you think, how do we do that? Because you want people to experience just a great time when they come to church and praising God, but then also with their neighbors. So here's some of the things that we've kind of listed that you have to do. And number one, just what I said, social distancing is hard. And one of the things I love about this church is we have a multi-generation church. And so, you've got the young up to the old, and there's all kinds of vulnerable people even among that. And so, how do you social distance? And one of the things that a lot of businesses are doing, both if you go into a place, but even if you work at a place, they're taking your temperature before you come in. And just think of the logistics of trying to do that. And then you think, in your worship service, how long should it even go? Because the longer you're in a place, the more people you could become exposed to. And so, little things like that. And one of the things that's kind of floating out there too is the whole idea of singing. Is that really, especially without a mask, and that's another whole thing, but can you sing, and is that going to cause more droplets to go out and make the place more unsafe? And then, I just mentioned that, but I'll come back. It's the mask, Are people comfortable wearing masks? And are they comfortable if other people aren't wearing masks? So that gets to be a hard thing. And then the other thing I saw, somebody had a sign up was who's going to be there. So then you start thinking about, based on the guidelines of how many now can meet and maybe eventually more, you begin to think to yourself, do you have to reserve a spot? What happens if people show up? So that creates some other challenges of that. Communion is so important to us, and you start thinking about somebody either has to put a bunch of packets together and then everybody comes. You can't come together to get it. How do you get that out there, and where do you leave them? And I just want everybody to be aware that sanitizing a building of our size is huge, and especially if you have multiple services and you've got to figure out in between how much time, and then can you even physically do that in that time? And so that's a challenge, but one of the things that we're hoping as we move a little bit farther, we know how important fellowship is, and so I hope you're in a small group, and if you're not, hopefully we can begin working on getting you connected, but those are important things, and we can do that in a smaller, less exposing way to numerous people. And then also, please, all the technology that we have today, if you're able to do it, please use that, because I just want to give our ministers another shout out. They have created and put things out there that are intended to help us to stay on mission. And so please, they're trying to equip us. We want you to pray. We want you to serve and to share. And so all those opportunities, please consider doing those.
We as a staff, and I don't want to give too much away now because we're hoping to reveal it later, but we've kind of created a little rhythm. We've got some things we've been doing, and sometimes those things, after a while, they lose their novelty and stuff. And so we're trying to think through right now, just for this summer, what are some different things that we can do that would re-engage people, help them find some social interaction while maybe still physically distancing. What are some ways we can continue to try to equip and different ways. And so we're hoping that this summer is going to be look a little different, but have a little bit more going on. Because you're right, Sunday morning in the building, doing a worship service, it doesn't seem feasible right now. And so what are some other ways, and that's what we're trying to think through, what are some other ways outside of that we can keep people connected and keep people engaged? And so if this pandemic has shown us anything, it's that nothing is set in stone, right? I mean, somebody says something today and tomorrow it changes. and that's true everywhere. Politics, even us, we've said things and it's changed. Like, it's just constantly changing. Nobody really knows. So with that kind of caveat out there, we're not going to meet now. We're going to kind of keep this online presence, this online worship experience. And we're not even really going to set a date for when we are going to start corporate worship. But we have thought through some, what would be the requirements or the guidelines that would get us to the point of having serious discussions about reentering the building again. And so maybe, why don't you share with the church what we've talked through as being some of the things that would set us up for that?
Yeah, I think at all times we should not just think about ourselves but other people. And I think that's maybe one of the things. We have determined that we want to try to do something which is best for everyone. And so we actually really covet your patience and your prayers as we try to do that. We want to act upon evidence. I think, Gilbert, you said it so good, is there's so many voices out there. And so we really want to act on, at the time, the best evidence. And guess what? That evidence is changing and keeps coming in. And so you want to be wise in that and act that way. And so, our commitment is we're going to revisit the in-person worship experience that aligns with what the state and the county give us as guidelines. And we're eager to do this. But the biggest thing I can tell you is we want to do it only when we consider we can do it safely and can protect as much as possible when people come into this building.
I think also another part of that I know we've talked about is when we can do that in as large a gathering as possible with the least amount of hoops we have to jump through, right? So yeah, all those things come together because I think, we want it, right? We want it, but we also want to be smart, be wise about that. Okay, so with all that said, you mentioned feedback. We want to hear from our missional partners. We've been working on a survey that we're hoping to get out there, hopefully this week. So why don't you maybe share what this survey really is going to be about, what kind of information we're hoping to get, and who we hope will take the survey.
Yeah. We want your feedback. There's ideas. I think everybody during this time has probably turned into a better learner trying to figure these things out. And so this survey, the first thing we'd probably like to do is just tell us about your experience using the online things we're doing. We want to get some feedback. How's that working? And maybe there's a reason you can't do it. Let us know that. We really want to find out because right now that's the best way that we know how to do this. And the other thing is we really want to hear what your expectations are from the church if we do have in-person gatherings. We need to know what you expect from us, and then also what are you comfortable with, maybe in yourself and others. And so that's going to be important as we think about what does it look like when we reopen. We'll gauge all of that. Who we want everybody, teenagers on up, to do that. It's just important to hear everybody's voice. And if you're married, please, both you and your spouse fill this out because we know that we all have differences as we think, and we want to hear that. In fact, we use the word, we value your feedback. And so here's your chance to kind of tell us what's going on, and we can hear from you.
I'm doing a sermon series, Walking in the Dark. We are really walking in the dark. The sermon series is as much for us in leadership as it is for anyone else because this is all an experiment. And so we covet your prayers. We ask for grace when we make mistakes. We ask for patience. And we ask that you continue to allow us to experiment because that's what all this is a big experiment to see what's going to be the best thing for the mission of this church and for our missional partners. And so continue to pray for our shepherds, continue to pray for the staff, and we want to do what's best for this church and what's best for the mission. Curt, do you have any final words of encouragement you'd like to share before we close out?
Yeah, I hope if God is on mission and all this stuff's going on, if we can get better at doing things, I think this is a great opportunity. It's hard. It's hurt. Nobody likes where we're at, but I think it's caused all of us, to appreciate how important church is, how fellowship is, being together. But then also, if you're like me, when I'm out in the public, I see, especially with my neighbors, people are more friendly. They're one of our mission things is sharing, and I've just been able to talk to people and get in their lives because of all this going on. So let's take advantage of this. Again, let's try to thrive while we're in difficult times. I think that's the way Christ would want it, and we can truly be that light.
I think what I hear you saying is, and all this talk about when we can go to church, why don't we just be the church? Be church.
Good.
All right. Well, thanks, church. Thanks for taking the time to listen to these midweek encouragement videos. We love you, and we'll see you soon.
Love you.